Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio. So if you guys like the content, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So this is one of the ratios, it's probably the main ratio of crypto that I talk about on the channel is the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio, the Ethereum valuation against Bitcoin. Arguably, I think this is more important than looking at the valuation against USD, because the idea again is if you want exposure to the market, you can get Bitcoin, and if you can't do any better than Bitcoin, then why invest in other coins? And I think Ethereum is one of those ones that can provide you with slightly higher risk adjusted returns, and I think it's worth the risk. This is not financial advice, but this is just my opinion. Basically projecting out what I think the data is telling me. So one of the things we've talked about, this is where we were last time I made a video on the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio where I was showing my own custom chart. And you can see that since then, this is what's happened. So that's what's happened. So is the party over? Personally, I think the party's just beginning. Okay. I think that we are, there's a good chance that we're at the very early stages of a bull market. Bitcoin has now held the 20-week moving average as support for 7 weeks after testing it. So in terms of the market sentiment, it's definitely leaning bullish. Now there's a lot of people that would contend with the economy, that stocks are about to crash, and with the correlation of Bitcoin to stocks, that Bitcoin's also going to crash. My contention is there's a good chance that stocks won't actually crash, and I mean, yeah, there can be slight corrections, but there are all the time. But at the end of the day, we could still see a multi-year rally. So one of the things we're going to do in this video is just look at the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio, just look at it in terms of the same trends we looked at in the past, and one of them identifies, talks about, and these are just copy pasted from the old PowerPoint, but just looking at the cool down phases of each of these peaks, the kind of a local reaccumulation phase, these accumulation phases that come few and far between, the first peak, the second peak, cool off phase, and then final capitulation, right? So first peak, second peak, cool off phase, and final capitulation. And this, we talked about this back in 2019, this point right here being kind of the beginning stage of our reaccumulation phase. And I think it was. I think this has been the reaccumulation phase for Ethereum against Bitcoin in the second half of 2019 and maybe the first half of 2020. And that we started going back up. One of the things we've noted before is that the prior cooldown phase tends to be the next accumulation phase, right? So prior cooldown phase tends to become the next accumulation phase. Now, it's unclear if we're going to see the same structure as the last market cycle where we have these major peaks. But one of the things we can also note is that the prior peaks tended to correspond to the next cool-off phase before final capitulation. So it's kind of like delaying it one cycle, whether it's the blow-off top to then becoming the cool-off phase, the next sub-cycle, or if it's the cool-off phase, which is becoming the next accumulation phase, the next sub-cycle. So we see this general trend up that we had from 2015 through 2018. We see the trend down that we experienced over the last few years, and then what we identified starting in 2020 as a momentum shift in the valuation of Ethereum against Bitcoin, and that this trend was most likely finished and that we were beginning a new trend. And so far, I think we're seeing it exactly play out. I have not changed this box for months now. We're basically just going straight up the center of it, and I think that's a good thing, right? Now that we've been going up it for a while, there is a good point. There's a good chance that, as we've talked about before, that this is the new accumulation phase. Okay, so we have to consider that there is a good possibility, and this is what I said back, earlier this year, was that I think that the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio, after breaking out of this phase down here, will likely spend a decent amount of time in this regime up here of the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio. So I think there's a good chance we're going to continue to spend a decent amount of time in that range. But ultimately speaking, I do think that the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio is more or less just getting started in terms of where it could be headed over the next several years. So don't get too bogged down with short-term corrections. We know the reason why it did it, right? Bitcoin went to the 20-week, it tested it for several weeks in a row. When this happens, Ethereum, Ethereum and altcoins will likely bleed against Bitcoin and against USD, and every subsequent test of the 20-week, if they happen week after week, it'll cause further and further bleeding, and it will take longer and longer for these coins to regain that confidence to keep moving up if Bitcoin keeps testing the 20-week. So far, Bitcoin has been moving up week after week, more or less, not every week, but for the most part, over the last couple of months, it's been moving up week over week. We're staying just ahead of the 20-week moving average. So with that said, one of the main things we've talked about before for Ethereum to remain bullish is we need Bitcoin to be above the 20-week, fairly significantly above it, and then it needs to be moving sideways or slightly up. We don't want it moving up too quickly, and we don't want it moving down too quickly. When that happens, it's not good for Ethereum, it's not good for altcoins. So what you want to look for now is if Bitcoin continues to be super volatile and is moving up or down significantly week over week, then there's a good chance the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio will not see any immediate valuation increase, okay? If, on the other hand, we see Bitcoin start to go sideways at around 11.5, 11.6, 11.7, which is a pretty bullish area for Bitcoin to be, then I think there's a good chance that Ethereum will start gaining back against Bitcoin and just continue on up this general uptrend that we started in 2020. So this was the first cycle, and it was basically I just roughly drew this around it. And then the second cycle, I do anticipate, if you follow the channel and the idea of lengthening cycles, I do anticipate it taking a bit longer and not giving us quite as the same return on investment, okay? So in the same amount of time. So I think it'll likely take, till 2023. We could have a couple boom and bust cycles during that time, like we had over here. But ultimately speaking, I do think that if as long as Bitcoin holds the 20-week and continues moving up, then I think that over the macro scale, the Ethereum valuation increase against Bitcoin is just getting started. Okay, this would be my contention. This was the momentum shift of 2016, so going into 2016, a huge momentum shift. 2020, we've seen a shift as well, but you can see it's not quite as spectacular as the one we saw back in 2016. And again, I do think it's just we're not going to see the same type of ROI in the same type of time frame. Doesn't mean you can't make a lot of money, right? I mean, of course, there's money to be made in the markets. It just means that you need to be more cognizant of what can and cannot happen, or what's likely to happen and what's likely not to happen, so you can take advantage of it at the right time. Because if you think it's going to do something like last cycle, exactly like last cycle, and you're waiting for that to happen, then you might be in for a bad surprise. But if, on the other hand, you account for the fact that there's a good chance that we will experience diminishing returns and lengthening cycles, then you can use that to help make more informed decisions going forward. So I just wanted to provide a brief update on the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio. I think, short term, yeah, it's been a little bit bearish, but again, it's nothing to write home about, right? It's nothing to worry about. It's still generally doing pretty well over the course of 2020, and there's a good chance that it'll do well over the next 2 or 3 years. There's going to be some times where it doesn't do so great, and then other times where it's probably exploding quicker than we've seen it explode so far this cycle. But the key thing is to stay resolute and to just stay disciplined in your approach to handling your Ethereum position and against Bitcoin. And we also, in a recent video on Ethereum, we talked about how, historically speaking, I'm not going to show it in this video because I showed it in the last video on Ethereum, but historically speaking, there tends to be a good point in December to buy Ethereum with Bitcoin, and that cashing that trade out in the first quarter of the year has always resulted in like at least a 50 to 60% return against Bitcoin, sometimes upwards of over 1,000% return against Bitcoin, but those returns were earlier on. So now we'll look to see if that plays out again. If it does, then maybe if Bitcoin's testing the 20-week for the next couple months or so, there's a good chance the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio isn't going to start exploding if that happens, and therefore maybe by the end of the year it will give a good a good signal in a sense to, okay, it's been depleted. The ratio has gone down for a few months now, or it's been moving sideways for a while. We recognize this pattern has happened literally every year in the past. Every fourth quarter, there tends to be a bleed of Ethereum against Bitcoin. We've already seen that this quarter, so right. We're already in October, and we've watched the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio come down a little bit over the last few weeks. So we've seen this before. Business as usual. I would stay resolute. If you guys like the content, please subscribe to the channel. Give the video a thumbs up. Check out the Telegram channel in the description below. And if you want access to the premium content, you can check out my website at intothecryptoverse.com. That'll wrap it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.